Most people are stuck in a loop of business that doesn't move the needle. They work hard, fill their calendars, and still feel behind, overwhelmed, underpaid, and unfulfilled. What if the secret to a better life wasn't doing more, but doing less of what doesn't matter? This is a summary of the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch, an independent summary created for educational and informational purposes only. If this summary resonates with you, I encourage you to purchase the full book and explore it in greater depth. Koch's book explains how a small number of efforts, people, or resources consistently drive the majority of outcomes. This imbalance, often expressed as 80% of results come from 20% of causes, shows up everywhere in business, health, relationships, and personal productivity. The book is both a lens and a toolkit, helping readers identify the few vital factors that create the most impact and cut the rest. The 80-20 principle is grounded in a simple but powerful observation. The world is not evenly balanced. In virtually every domain, a few inputs generate most of the outputs. In economics, Pareto originally noticed that 20% of people owned 80% of the land in Italy. But this principle isn't limited to wealth. It shows up in sales, relationships, traffic, time management, and more. Koch gives examples across domains. 1.3% of films generate 80% of box office revenue. 20% of customers account for 80% of profit. 20% of roads see 80% of the traffic. What makes the 80-20 principle profound is not just that the imbalance exists, but that it's persistent, predictable, and often invisible to those caught in the weeds. Most people assume a 50-50 distribution, that equal effort yields equal results. But Koch argues this belief is not only false, it's actively harmful. It leads to wasted effort, missed opportunities, and chronic stress. The solution, according to Koch, is to shift both how we analyze and how we think. First, through 80-20th analysis, the deliberate comparison of causes and results to identify where the disproportionate impact lies. Second, through 80-20 thinking, a mindset shift that naturally searches for the few elements that make the biggest difference. Koch explores how the 80-20 dynamic plays out across different areas of life. In business, 20% of products generate 80% of profits. In time management, 20% of activities produce 80% of your meaningful results. In relationships, a few connections bring most of your joy and support. This awareness enables individuals and organizations to stop treating all inputs equally and start doubling down on the few that actually matter. He shares the history behind the concept, beginning with Vilfredo Pareto, who first observed the wealth imbalance in 1897. But the principle gained new life when applied in fields like quality control, thanks to people like Joseph Uron, and in computing, where IBM discovered that 20% of the code accounted for 80% of usage time. These practical applications showed how the principle could guide decisions that increased performance and reduced waste. The book goes further, showing how the 80-20 principle connects to chaos theory, tipping points, and feedback loops. In systems, a slight early lead can be amplified over time, like a company that enters the market with a slightly better product and ends up with a dominant market share. These nonlinear dynamics help explain why inequality reappears in so many forms. A few people, products, or efforts surge ahead and accumulate advantage. In practice, this means that outcomes are often determined not by hard work spread evenly, but by focus on the right efforts. A small number of well-directed actions can transform results in sales, marketing, management, or personal goals. Koch stresses that the key is not just identifying the 20% that matters, but making tough decisions to eliminate or reduce the other 80%. This is where most people struggle. They cling to low-impact habits, customers, or tasks out of guilt, fear, or inertia. To use the 80-20 principle effectively, Koch introduces two paths: empirical analysis and intuitive thinking. The analytical approach involves gathering data, ranking it, and identifying imbalances. For example, tracking which clients drive most revenue or which activities consume most time. The thinking approach is more flexible and creative, scanning your life for areas where a small part generates most of the value or stress. Both are useful, and together they become powerful. One of Koch's most compelling points is that even within the top 20%, there are further layers of imbalance. You can apply the principle recursively. Of the top 20%, another 20% will generate 80% of that subset's impact, meaning just 4% of total inputs could be driving 64% of results. This exponential leverage encourages readers to keep narrowing their focus to the absolute best opportunities. In business, Koch argues that most companies don't fully exploit this insight. They spend energy supporting unprofitable products, chasing low-value customers, or sticking with unproductive staff. The ones who thrive are those who streamline aggressively, cutting back on distractions and focusing on the few offerings, clients, or systems that deliver outsized results. The same logic applies to personal life. Koch gives examples of how the principle helped him in university, learning just a fraction of the material to excel in exams, and later in consulting, where a handful of clients drove most revenue. He used it to pick investments, allocate time, and even simplify his wardrobe. In every case, identifying and leveraging the critical few created freedom and advantage. This mindset challenges a lot of conventional wisdom. We're often taught that balance, fairness, and consistent effort are virtuous. But Koch argues that these values, while comforting, often lead to mediocrity. Excellence comes not from doing everything equally well, but from identifying where your efforts truly pay off and doubling down there. The rest of the book shows how this idea can be applied practically to productivity, time management, income generation, and happiness. But the foundation is always the same: the recognition that most things don't matter, and a few things matter more than we dare to admit. Once you grasp the logic behind the 80-20 principle, the next challenge is applying it in daily life. And that's where things get interesting. Most people don't fail for lack of effort. They fail because they spread their effort too thin. Koch pushes readers to become radically selective. Whether it's your time, your clients, or your habits, you need to start making sharper distinctions between what creates real impact and what just fills the hours. He argues that freedom, real freedom, doesn't come from working harder or earning more money. It comes from control. And control, in turn, comes from doing fewer things with greater intensity. If you can identify the 20% of work that produces most of your results, you can often cut your working hours dramatically without sacrificing income. The problem is, most of us are addicted to the illusion of productivity. We feel guilty if we're not constantly busy, even if that busyness isn't producing anything meaningful. Koch tells stories of consultants, business owners, and creatives who transformed their careers by ruthlessly cutting the 80% of low-yield tasks. One consultant realized that only 2 of his clients brought in the bulk of his revenue and referrals, and the rest just drained his energy. So he fired most of them, raised his rates for the remaining few, and found himself working less and earning more. Another entrepreneur found that 20% of her product line generated nearly all her profit, so she cut the rest and reinvested in the top sellers. These decisions sound extreme, but they're backed by math, and once you see the results, they start to feel like common sense. This shift isn't just about productivity or money. It's about quality of life. Koch suggests applying the principle to time, relationships, hobbies, even emotions. For example, 20% of your time likely accounts for 80% of your satisfaction. Maybe it's an early morning walk, reading before bed, or an uninterrupted hour of creative flow? The obvious question is, why not make more space for those moments and eliminate some of the dead weight? Most people live as if all hours are created equal, but that's rarely true. A small fraction of your time carries nearly all the joy, meaning, and clarity. And when you protect that time, everything else improves too. In personal relationships, Koch suggests identifying the few people who truly energize and support you, those who contribute most to your well-being, and investing more time and care into those bonds. At the same time, he encourages minimizing contact with draining or toxic individuals. While this might sound cold, it's a practical way to protect your energy and attention. Emotional bandwidth is finite. Using it wisely is just as important as budgeting money. The 80-20 principle also offers a powerful approach to problem solving. Instead of tackling every issue with equal weight, you can zoom in on the root causes. Most problems, Koch argues, don't come from 1,000 different sources. They come from a few repeated patterns. A company might struggle with revenue because just a handful of products are misaligned with customer needs. A person might be stressed not because life is overwhelming, but because of one nagging financial issue or one broken relationship. When you identify the vital few causes of your most persistent problems, you can stop firefighting and start resolving. Koch also touches on how the principle can be applied to goals. Most people set too many objectives and chase them simultaneously, often without much success. A better strategy is to find one or two goals that, if achieved, would create a ripple effect across other areas of life. He calls this the leverage approach. For instance, improving your health could boost your energy, confidence, and performance at work. Fixing your finances could relieve pressure on your relationship and allow you to take creative risks. Instead of piling on more goals, you identify the highest leverage ones and go all in. Of course, applying the 80-20 principle takes courage. It's easier to stay busy than to question what's truly worthwhile. It's tempting to avoid hard choices, to keep saying yes to everything, to hold on to clients, projects, and habits that are comfortable but low value. Koch doesn't pretend this is easy, but he insists it's necessary if you want to break out of mediocrity. The trade-off is clear: a little discomfort up front for a lot more clarity and freedom later. One of the most liberating ideas in the book is that you don't need to optimize everything. You only need to optimize the few things that matter. This isn't about perfection. It's about return on effort. If 20% of your habits create most of your growth, just focus on refining those. If 20% of your content generates the most engagement, build around that. Koch's message is blunt but refreshing. Stop wasting energy trying to make everything work. Make the right things work better and ignore the rest. Koch's final chapters explore how the 80-20 principle can radically reshape your thinking about wealth, work, and happiness, not just as a business tactic, but as a lifestyle philosophy. He challenges the assumption that effort and reward are proportionally linked. In reality, the world doesn't reward you for being busy. It rewards you for being effective. And effectiveness means spending more time on what moves the needle and walking away from the rest. This mindset unlocks a new approach to money. Koch explains that wealth doesn't come from working more hours or climbing the career ladder. It comes from owning or creating high-yield assets, businesses, intellectual property, investments, or systems that work harder than you do. In other words, financial freedom isn't tied to how much you work, but to how well you use the power of leverage. If you can identify a small number of opportunities with outsized potential, you can dramatically accelerate wealth creation while reducing effort. He draws on personal stories to show this in action. After leaving consulting, Koch became an investor. He focused on identifying a few small, high-potential companies and investing heavily in just those, ignoring the usual advice to diversify. The results were huge. His experience supports the broader claim. Most of your wealth and success will come from a few big bets that pay off. Trying to spread yourself across dozens of average opportunities only dilutes your impact. But the 80-20 principle isn't only about money. Koch also turns his attention to happiness. He argues that just as a small number of clients or habits drive most results in business, a small number of people, experiences, and choices are responsible for the majority of your fulfillment. If you can identify the few things that make you feel truly alive and then prioritize them relentlessly, you can build a more meaningful life with far less struggle. This is where the principle becomes truly personal. He encourages readers to conduct a happiness audit, to reflect on what times, places, and people have brought them the most joy over the years. More often than not, it's a handful of moments, a quiet dinner with someone you love, a creative project that made you lose track of time, a spontaneous trip, or a sense of mastery in something you care about. The message is simple but powerful. If you can expand the presence of those vital few ingredients in your life, you can experience much more satisfaction with much less complexity. Koch also challenges the myth of time scarcity. We often feel like we don't have enough time, but that's usually because we're spending it on the wrong things. Most people waste the majority of their time on low-return activities, checking emails, attending pointless meetings, managing minor problems, or mindlessly scrolling. He suggests that if you cut the trivial and double down on high-value activities, even for just a few hours a day, you could drastically improve both your output and your quality of life. This isn't about becoming a productivity robot. It's about creating space. The 80-20 lifestyle is spacious, intentional, and energizing. It gives you time to think, to rest, to create, and to enjoy. It's about doing less and experiencing more. And that requires a major shift in priorities. You can't keep trying to fix everything or please everyone. You have to decide what's worth your time and attention, and protect it ruthlessly. In closing, Koch positions the 80-20 principle not just as a tool for business success, but as a compass for living well. Whether you're looking to build a profitable business, design a meaningful life, or simply reclaim your time, the principle offers a clear path. Identify the small number of inputs that matter most and align everything around them. Cut the noise, focus on the signal, and use the resulting freedom to craft a life you actually want. He ends with a strong encouragement to act. Awareness isn't enough. You have to apply the principle again and again across every area of life until it becomes second nature. The more you do it, the more leverage you create, and the easier it becomes to escape the grind and build a life of purpose, clarity, and control. 5 practical, memorable takeaways. 1. Most of your results come from a small fraction of your effort. Find the 20% that matters and do more of it. 2. Don't just work harder. Work smarter by eliminating low-value activities, clients, and distractions. 3. Apply the principle beyond business, in relationships, habits, time use, and happiness. It's everywhere. 4. You don't need more time. You need better focus. Protect your high-value hours like your life depends on it. 5. A few bold, well-chosen decisions can transform your life. Stop managing the noise. Start multiplying what works.